Hello everyone and welcome to this on-demand cybersecurity webinar. This webinar is presented by Yubico, Seyfarth and the Association of Swedish Engineering Industries in Sweden. It's really great to be here and we have an excellent panel with us. My name is Gustav Ceder and I am a cybersecurity public relations consultant and I'm moderating today. So to start off, let's do some introductions. Paul, can you please say a few words about yourself?
Hi, good morning from New York. It's Paul Ferrillo. I'm a cybersecurity partner at a large law firm here in New York City. I practice a lot in the area of incident response, crisis counseling, and class action litigation, Gustav, when plaintiffs have to bring suit against the company for data breaches. So I do a little bit of everything, very active practice here in New York, and it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me to participate.
Thank you so much for taking your time, Paul. Jan, how about a few words from you, sir?
Okay, Jan Fecko, the CISO of Ericsson, and I'm based in Stockholm. So what I do, I lead and coordinate all the work with the information security throughout Ericsson's global operation, which sometimes is a bit challenging of all the time zones and complexity of languages and regulations. But that's what I do, and I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Gustav.
Thank you, Jan. So happy to have you here. And Sebastian, is a few words from you, sir.
Yes, Sebastian Elfors is my name. I work as a senior solutions architect at Yubico, and I've been in the cybersecurity industry for about 25 years by now, and I've mainly been focusing on digital identities, electronic signatures, and authentication. And I've also been working with compliance for the past 20 years, in particular with the ADAS regulation in the EU. And I'm also very happy and honored to be here, so thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. About 1 year after SolarWinds, we had a very dramatic 2021. How is the cybersecurity landscape looking now going into 2022? Paul, you want to start?
I think there's a mixed bag here. I think that you have got increased focus from the United States government on cybersecurity. We have the ability to indict certain bad actors. I think it's cybersecurity is on an issue on the national stage here in the United States. I think we're all anxious in order to understand what's going on in the Ukraine and whether or not we're going to see any spillover, of bad actors trying to hack the United States as well too. I think the bad part, as we were talking earlier, Gustav, is that we're expecting another banner year for ransomware. Ransomware hit all-time highs in 2021, where we think there's going to be similar high figures for 2022. And it's not just ransomware as we were talking about. It's ransomware, it's data theft, data exploitation, whereas they're not just locking down networks, but they're stealing documents first, and then they're saying, give me several $1 million and I'm going to publish your data on my happy blog, for lack of a better term, which was the re-evil blog. So I think we got a mixed bag of tricks. Cybersecurity is top priority here in the United States, but I think we can't let our guard down, because I think we're going to see more and more ransomware attacks here in 2022.
I'm curious to hear, Jan, how are things looking for the cybersecurity landscape going into 2022 from your perspective and top of mind?
I would echo what Paul said. We see geopolitical tension more than ever. We really can see it now. and we all see all the ransomware attacks as well, and we prepare ourselves for ransomware. But we also see things like Log4j coming up, and vulnerabilities come more and more frequent with pretty high severity. So one thing I see in my team is we're on standby all the time, and we deal with high vulnerabilities, we deal with incidents, so it's a 24/7, 365 activity. So last Christmas was SolarWinds. This year it was Log4j. So that's also a consideration here. How do we build an organization that is resilient enough to run all of these activities many times in parallel and to be sustainable? I think that's also a question for the future. And to add to that one more thing, it's a little bit of a technology arms race. So we also need to look into tools and to replace tools with a new generation. And that's the life cycle of those tools is getting shorter and shorter because of the threat landscape, so to say. So it's busy, in a way fun, but you need to be cautious about your own time and to get some time off from time to time. That's what I see.
Thank you. That's very important. Sebastian, how is 2022 looking from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I can just agree to the previous speakers and echo everything what they say. And I would say that after the SolarWinds, the trend has become even more devastating. So we had a Kaseya attack with affected Coop, the grocery store here in Sweden, and also the attack on US Colonial Pipeline. So these attacks had an even more severe impact on infrastructure for food and gas, which is absolutely critical for our society. And ransomware is, of course, a very big trend. It even caused a Finnish company to go bankrupt last year. And we all have supply chain attacks such as SolarWinds. But we shouldn't forget that most of the cyber attacks are still initiated by stolen credentials, and they are about 80% still. So that is a threat vector that we should take very seriously too. But I think the good news is that the awareness for cyber protection is growing. We have the Biden executive order in the United States. IT systems are getting improved and patched, and some hacker groups such as Revil are now under arrest. But still, we have cyber attacks on Ukrainian government websites and very severe issues due to the Log4j exploit.
Thank you, Sebastian, for that. So there might be some employees at organizations who say that I'm not really a target. What do I have that is worth stealing? Is that still a relevant question that is coming up, and how do you address it? I would like to hear from you, Paul.
It is still a relevant question. I think you hear I'm not a target. What do I have to steal? Why is it my problem? You tend to hear that, after the fact, Gustav, when you go into companies after a breach and say, why didn't you turn on multi-factor authentication? And you get, it's because people thought it was too burdensome and too time consuming. What? What do you mean? You can't use multi-factor authentication? So I think the answer to the employee's question is, if they're at a desk, if they're working on data, if they're working on data for the company, they're a target. And if they click on the link and click on a spear phishing link, they could take down their own network just as easy. So I think an old friend used to say that here in New York, cybersecurity is the biggest team sport ever. And I think employees are probably the biggest teammates that need to assist companies with cybersecurity. And I know Jan must figure that out, being in a huge company like he is. It's all about your people.
Please, Jan, what do you have to say?
Yeah, but it is all about the people, because all the old attacks, all the old things we have technical protection for. But the problem is all the new things, and there you have the human beings. So human beings acting, human beings seeing things, being suspicious, reporting, that's really good to have. but also having human beings acting in a proper way is really important. So it's really about the individual behind the keyboard, safe behavior, good awareness. So it's all about the human being at the end.
Don't click on the link.
Yeah, exactly. And then we send out surveys where we ask people to click on links. So we have mixed messages from a corporate sometimes.
Actually, picking up on that, Jan, prior to joining Ericsson, you were at Swedbank. I read in a recent big survey that you did at Ericsson that information security was ranked really at the top as an important topic for the employees. How would you compare the information security from the employee perspective at Swedbank and Ericsson? I suppose they're very important in both organizations, but still two different types of companies and sectors.
Exactly. So I think there are commonalities and there are differences as well. So both companies take it really serious. But if you think about banking, and especially a bank like Swedbank, which is a retail bank or having a lot of consumers, it's all about how do we protect your money and how do you authenticate yourself when you access your money, and how do you not give out your details so someone else can fraud you. And you can also at a bank, you can see the human being behind. If there is a fraud, you can see the human being, someone saving all their life and suddenly they lose all that savings. You can really feel for that. It's a little bit different at Ericsson. We're further away from the customers, but we're building the infrastructure for the world. So that's why I think information security is top of mind at Ericsson. It's infrastructure we all use, and it needs to be safe. So at Ericsson, it's a bit different. It's infrastructure. We're building something for the world. At the bank, we're building something really for the people using this service. But in both companies, secure services and products is really key. And that's a good thing to see.
Thank you. That's so interesting. Going back or speaking about sort of the board members, Paul, I'm interested to hear, you speak a lot to boards. How do we educate the board members and give them readable information for them to be aware of the company's cybersecurity posture? How do you translate text speak into board speak, and then perhaps also into employee speak?
It's a very good question. What I tell CISOs sometimes is, you need to give me information concerning the network, but you need to put it in, excuse the expression, it's an American one, Sesame Street format, meaning it needs to be in the basics and it needs to be non-tech speak, non-cyber speak. We find many times the CISOs aren't given an opportunity to educate the board members. There's not enough time during meetings. There's not regularly scheduled meetings with CISOs. It's a very good question, Gustav, and every company is different. But I would say what you have to do is you have to turn in Jan's second language, cybersecurity, into sentences. Make sure that the directors understand what's going on. There'll be some directors that absolutely know what's going on, and there'll be some directors who never grew up with a computer on their desk. And I think that's part of the problem, Gustav, is that you're talking about, directors sometimes in their 60s and 70s. Long story made short, turn cyber into Sesame Street, make it easy to understand, and then make sure you're communicating with your employees as well, too. We communicate a lot with our employees on training. We communicate a lot with our employees if there's a data breach. We need to make sure that we're clear and understandable when we're talking with employees, because not everybody is as smart as Jan when it comes to cybersecurity. It's just not that way. And I think that we need to bring it down to a basic common language.
Jan, do you Do you have you found that common language in a sense? And what's your reflections on Paul's comments here, speaking to the boards from your perspective?
Yeah, I have experience only from two boards, basically Swedbank's and Ericsson's, and both are really concerned when it comes to cybersecurity or information security. So in a way, it's easier to get the board's attention than middle management, I would say. I find the board being really interested. They want to know, they ask detailed questions, and they feel really accountable. Sometimes we get articles from our board. Have you seen this? How would you value this information? So they're really on their toes when it comes to cybersecurity, both at a bank and as a company, as Ericsson. And sometimes I need to find a better language addressing middle management. They have many priorities. They have a tough day. They have to persuade their teams and their colleagues and their peers. So sometimes I find it much harder to actually discuss cybersecurity with middle management. Why should they prioritize this before, let's say, a customer delivery? So I guess that's harder actually than the board talk these days. That's at least my experience the last years. The board is really keen to understand and to take their accountability, to take their responsibility, I would say. So a bit different view than you mentioned, Paul. I think they are there.
Some of them.
Yeah, some of them. And unfortunately, I work with two boards where they are all there, but middle management is harder for us, I would say, sometimes. Priority. I know, Sebastian, you meet many different customers. Maybe you have different experience from different sectors.
Please, Sebastian, what is your reflection on the board and the middle management in the organization?
The companies that I've been dealing with are in the qualified trust service provider space, meaning that they are 100% dedicated to cybersecurity. So I've encountered 100% attention from all the way from the board through middle management down to the administrators at the floor, which is a little bit different experience from what John and Paul might have. But it's a very interesting discussion to see all of these different perspectives.
But maybe, Sebastian, you have found the language to engage all levels.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite easy since everybody's 100% expert in the field that I'm working. So it's very much about compliance, actually, I would say, to be sure that you're compliant with the ADAS regulation, the GDPR legislation, the NIST directive, and so forth and so on. So it's quite easy for me.
But compliance isn't good cybersecurity. Compliance can just be check the box as well, too. You both are dealing with companies that are brilliant when it comes to cybersecurity. It's not always the case when somebody's been breached here and you ask what happened and they didn't turn on multi-factor authentication. Now, that wouldn't be a problem at Ericsson. Rest assured that is a problem. But I think that it's important to engage the boards of directors. It's important for the CISOs to give meaningful information. I sometimes talk about giving boards a vulnerability assessment as well too. They need data to understand how to best help the company build the resources that it needs to respond to the threats of today.
Today, I think we have the privilege of having representation from both sides of the Atlantic. So Paul, you're in New York and the rest of us are in Stockholm. So Paul, from your perspective, you dealt with boards on both sides. Have you noticed any differences in the sort of the mindset or the attitudes boards in Europe versus the United States, or not? You know.
Gustav, I deal a lot with two different roles. I deal with companies that are purely in the US, and I deal with companies that have footprints in the EU. I'll go out and say this. I find the U.S. companies to be more engaged right now than ever before. That's more engaged than zero when they weren't engaged at all. So let's just be clear about that. I think that companies are engaged, but we still have a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of training. We still have a lot of effort to put into. So the answer to your question, I think U.S. boards are probably more akin and more attuned than EU boards. Perhaps it's the 2,000% increase in ransomware here in the United States in order to wake people up.
I'm curious to hear from you, Jan. When Ericsson is a dual-listed company, so both in Nasdaq New York and in Stockholm. From your role as a CISO, do you experience any differences in these two jurisdictions, and how do you navigate those?
Yes, and we listen in those two, but we also have business in many different countries. So regulation is a key thing to be on top of. And here I need to work with specialists understanding the regulation in each country where we operate, basically. So of course we see the differences, but I always have to work through specialists to make it right, so to say, for the specific legislation. But I would say the attention to cybersecurity, the increased regulation is common worldwide, and we can see trends. We can see certain countries pushing forward regulation, then you can see the regulation coming to other countries. So it's like a weather report. Now you see Germany doing this, then you can expect other countries to follow. So in one way, you become an expert in regulations overall. So we do see differences, and we also see where it starts and where it goes, basically. But as a general rule of thumb, engage with specialists for the specific legislation, so you get everything right. That's a key lesson, so to say.
But how do you engage them is the problem. How do you interest them? I think that's part of the problem here about what I'm seeing in the United States. How do I involve boards more? I say to board members, this stuff is real. You need to pay attention, or you're going to lose 10 points on your stock price when your breach is announced, and nobody, including Ericsson, wants to lose 10 points on their stock price.
So we engage with specialists like Paul for the American market, a specialist for the European market. I think that's key.
Indeed. So the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, are right now looking very intensively at updating, how companies should work on their cybersecurity disclosures and hygiene requirements. Paul, could you give us an update on the SEC? What are they looking at, and what can we expect from the U.S. regulators in a short perspective for listed companies in the United States?
Well, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission has moved a great deal over the years, Gustav, as you know. In 2011, there was guidance issued about disclosing the breach, but it didn't really say much. In 2018, there was commission guidance that talked a little bit more about getting the word out, making disclosures, and everything else. I think what the SEC Division of Enforcement, remember there's an SEC and there's an enforcement aspect of the SEC. What the Division of Enforcement is seeing is companies still not disclosing breaches in a timely manner. I would guess, and then the SEC is coming out with more guidance in the spring, Gustav, as we have talked about. I think we're going to be talking more about timeliness of disclosures. I think we're going to be talking more about substance of disclosures. I think the SEC wants to make it in order to help investors the best step possible. I think the SEC wants more information out there about cybersecurity, not less. And I think that's how if I was advising Jan, I would say, this is changing dramatically in the U.S. and those 2-paragraph disclosures don't work anymore.
I agree. I can just compare my work today and for 5 years ago and how much we work with disclosure reporting and understanding if it is something that should be reported or not. Today or 2017 is a big difference, I would say. I fully agree with you, Paul.
Yeah, I think that, Gustav, if you ask us, in a month or two, we'll probably be able to tell you more about what's going on with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Chair Gensler's SEC has been very active, have been very busy, not just on cyber, but on crypto, on a bunch of different things. I do think at the end of the day, Gustav, this is about increasing your disclosure, increasing the substance of your disclosure, making sure your investors know not only do you have your eye on the ball, but the board is meeting about cyber, the board understand what's going on. And I think that there is a whole bunch of ammunition that the SEC is going to come into and talk about disclosures. This is in my Harvard Law School articles, Gustav, that you have seen. And yeah, I encourage you to forward them around if this is of interest to the UK. I'm on the cutting edge of what the SEC is doing when it comes to cybersecurity disclosure.
Indeed, and actually here I want to ask you, Sebastian, so the equivalent to the SEC in Europe is the ESMA, the European Securities and Markets Authority. If you compare the sort of the regulations that we can expect in the United States, how is it looking in the EU? What can we expect from regulators there that is relevant to listed companies?
So in 2019, ESMA's supervisory priorities actually included a very increased focus on cybersecurity. So in the work program of 2019, it actually states that given the high risk related to cybersecurity, ESMA is monitoring cybersecurity threat landscape and any information on security incidents that have impact on trade registers. So ESMA is monitoring this on an ongoing basis. And in addition to this, there is an upcoming regulation here in the EU called DORA, Digital Operations Resilience Act. And this is a legislative proposal to the EU Commission where DORA aims to ensure that all participants in the financial system and strategic IT service provider, that they have the necessary safeguards in place to mitigate cyber attacks. And actually in the DORA regulation, it's explicitly stated certain cyber preventions, such as a company should implement policies and protocols for strong authentication mechanisms based on relevant standards and system controls.
Is it correct if I say that it appears that the SEC is a bit more vocal or visible in how they are wanting to regulate and speaking about it versus in the European counterparts? Paul, do you think that is the case or not?
I think it's the case, and I think it's because U.S. companies have suffered such extreme attacks, especially over 2020, 2021, and early 22 now with Log4j. I think that the SEC, in order to give investors as much information as possible, is forcing information down. And I think that it's Chair Gensler, who is the SEC chairman, is very concerned that the investors have information about cybersecurity, have it in a timely fashion, and have the ability to rely upon material information regarding the cybersecurity posture of a company. I think that Chair Gensler is going to keep it up. Again, Gustav, there will be more regulation coming down in the United States this spring. Don't forget, we have, just like the European Union, we have state law as well too. The 50 states have all 50 different data privacy, data breach laws, but you have regulation coming out of the states as well too. Right now, you've got a bunch of different things going on here in the United States, Gustav. I think we should do another one of these in 3 months, and you'll know more.
Thank you. To Jan, Ericsson stakeholder engagement takes a variety of forms, such as joint projects, advocacy, meetings, surveys, participation in industry associations. Can you give a few examples of successful stakeholder engagement in cybersecurity that you want to share?
I think Ericsson, we engage in many of these communities, so to say, but also when it comes to standardization and when it comes to telecom standards, Ericsson is one of the leading entities here. And I think what we want to show the world is that we actually take security serious, that we are self-regulating ourselves when it comes to security, and to show that we do not have to have mandatory regulation. Of course, we see the tendency from regulators to regulate us even more. But I think so far we have shown that we can take this responsibility and drive the different standards for telecom in a good way. We also engage into, like here in Stockholm, the Chamber of Commerce, how do we deal with digital society and the risks? So we engage both on a global standard level, but we also engage in the local communities where we act. And this is not just to be the good guy, but it actually gives us a bit of reality back to Ericsson. So to have a public-private collaboration is key for Ericsson, globally and locally, actually. So I would say the success here is just from the engagement and the insights we get, and hopefully we can affect others by our work, and that we actually spend some time on information security and we can provide insights also back to the community. So all in all, it's just, it is a rewarding activity, and that's why we do it. Wonderful, thank you.
Sebastian, you work specifically a lot with authentication. What could you say a few words about the advantages or disadvantages of various current authentication methods, and how you experience that from the company's point of view?
Yeah, so the most important, I think, when it comes to multi-factor authentication is to have hardware protected keys. That is the most important aspect, really, that either if it's a separate hardware authenticator or if it's a TPM on the phone. And in order to ensure this protection, you should have a certification on top of that, a FIPS 140-2 common criteria, or CSPN in France. And a very interesting multi-factor authentication protocol that's coming up, that is FIDO and WebAuthn, which is a new standard that protects against phishing attacks. And this is recognized by CISA and also the White House as the preferred MFA method. And FIDO is now being built into all major operating systems and browsers, which allows for a very tight integration for authentication solutions. And if you're having a separate security key, it should be easy to use, easy to plug into the computer through a USB port or by touching the phone over an NFC connection.
Jan, I'm curious to hear, in a very big organization, is it relevant to speak of a sort of a trade-off between being secure and user-friendly when it comes to the authentication methods of choice, and the different perhaps needs within a large organization? And how do you sort of consider those questions?
Yeah, of course, there is a trade-off, because if you make it too difficult and complex for your employees, they will find other ways and circumvent the protection you put in place. The beautiful thing with the single sign-on is actually it's secure and it's user-friendly. You sign in once and it's secure. So how do we get the single sign-on feature to have a huge coverage? I think that's when we balance usability and security. But definitely we can see when we do maintenance on equipment, we can see if we don't do that in a pretty good way, efficient way, we will find people being smart, being efficient, and then impose risk at our company. So it is a key concern. How do we get this balance throughout the operation, not just a single sign-on for me as a user of a laptop, but for all types of tasks we do, and very sensitive activities as well. So yes, this is a key concern when we design new things.
Paul, how do you tackle these questions when you speak to boards? Usability and being secure, sort of.
I think there are a mix of questions, and it depends upon the board you're speaking with to understand. I think there are some boards that Jan has stated and Jan has seen that are very sophisticated about cybersecurity, and they understand that multi-factor authentication is no different than signing into JP Morgan Chase or Citibank and getting a text message back to your phone. I think people understand that and appreciate that. I think one of the things that we don't see in the United States, and one of the things that I wonder if we will see, there is no rule that in the United States that says you must use multi-factor authentication. Our regulatory bodies don't speak to it. It's bloggers like me, Gustav, and others who speak to it all the time. I wonder if we're going to see more and more as the United States is going towards zero trust. I wonder if we're going to see more and more devotion to multi-factor authentication. As you know, President Biden is moving us towards zero trust as we speak.
Sebastian, do you have anything to add to that? Do you agree?
Yeah, I can totally agree. And actually, yesterday, Biden came out, or the White House, I should say, came out with an update to the Zero Trust Strategy Framework. And FIDO, which I just mentioned, that is now being recommended as the preferred multi-authentication standard, in particular for that Zero Trust strategy. And going back to John's comment, I can also echo that usability is super important. So security and user friendliness are key. And FIDO, once again, it's now being built into all operating systems, all smartphones with biometrics and TPM support. So it supports very, very strong security, non-phishable authentication standard, and it's super easy for the user to enroll credentials and actually use them for authentication.
Thank you. I think we are starting to round this off. I thought I would like to ask you all, to all viewers who are executives and board members at public companies, could you list 3 cybersecurity trends to watch for in 2022? Top of mind trends. Paul, how about you?
Zero trust. I think we're going to see more and more companies dovetailing towards zero trust. Remember that when President Biden or the White House comes up with stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean that the private sector must adjust towards zero trust. On the other hand, I think that because President Biden is saying it, I think it's more likely than not we are going to see zero trust more and more in 2022. I think another trend, bad trend, ransomware. I think we're going to continue to see more ransomware attacks. And I think lastly, the third, we're going to see a lot of weaponized vulnerabilities, meaning there's vulnerabilities in software that people are using to gain access to a network. And once they gain access, they are piggybacking on the vulnerabilities to drop ransomware or other sorts of malware. So I think what we're really seeing, and we've seen it in the last 6 months, and Jan, we're seeing it definitely with the Pog4j, is we're seeing a lot of weaponized vulnerabilities. Since SolarWinds, there seems to be a vulnerability every day. And of course, Patch Tuesday now is Patch Tuesday, Patch Wednesday, and Patch Thursday. Those are my 3 things.
So over to you, Jan. How about you? Top 3 trends to watch out for in 2022.
I fully agree with Paul's observations on those trends. If I am to bring a few other perspectives, given that threat landscape that Paul pushes for, ransomware, malware, and weaponized malware, I think, again, as I said in the beginning, tools, technology, in order to help you to defend your company, utilize AI and machine learning, because there's huge advancement here. So look out for your tools. How do you protect your company with technology? It would be the first one. A second thing I see a trend is, we mentioned compliance before. We can't be too compliance driven. We also have to look at our threats for our specific companies and look into risk-based controls. So standard is good, but then sharpen your controls where you have your risk. I would say that's the second trend I see. And thirdly, we need to join forces. So your security department and your enterprise risk management join forces. So security and risk together has a common language and focus on the right things. I would say so tools, technology, risk-based controls, and join forces, security, risk, and other departments working with this, join forces. I would say 3 advices for 22 for the board members.
Thank you, Jan. That is very insightful. How about you, Sebastian? 3 trends for the board members and executives to watch out for 2022.
I think one trend that will keep going is the ransomware and also the leakware trend. So leakware is an extension to ransomware, if you will, meaning that if a hacker comes over a database, they encrypt it, and then they blackmail the board, if you will. And if you don't pay the ransom, they will decrypt the data and leak it out on the dark web. And that is precisely what happened to the Finnish company Vastaamo that actually went bankrupt due to that attack. And we see also the ransom to increase. So it's super important to protect all sensitive data, of course. Another trend, it might not be so much for the boards, but we see, of course, an extreme geopolitical tension right now in Ukraine. And I heard actually on the news today that what could happen is a cyber attack rather than a military attack. So that's definitely something to watch out for. But on the positive side, that's number 3. I would say that one very positive development is the verifiable credentials and decentralized identifier initiative that is now coming up. It is also called self-sovereign identity, and that is being implemented into the ADAS version 2 Act here in the European Union, and will result in an e-wallet where you can store all your credentials from mobile driving license to passport to ID cards and use that across all over European Union. So that is super interesting development and something for the board to monitor very closely.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Thank you, Sebastian. With that, I think that we are wrapping this up. Thank you so much for taking your time today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gustav.
Thank you. Goodbye.